You've got two Renatas, both Scotto and Tebaldi. Two Titos, both
Two
Stipa
old
and
Renatas.
Gobi. And that doesn't even count Toti Del Monte. You know, I could go on, and I probably will.
On the Dallas Opera Network, you're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm your host, George Cederquist, joined by Oliver Camacho, Matt Cummings, and Weston Williams, as well as our guest this week, conductor Anthony Barese. All right, on the show, the European Football Championships are down to just 4 teams. The OBS works out the semifinals, and special guest, Maestro Anthony Barese, will pick a winner based on the opera prowess of the remaining 4 countries. Plus, 2-minute drill, good news from New York. Prototype is coming back. So is the Met. For the full episode, subscribe to the podcast on Stitcher. Just favorite that show on Apple Podcasts. Again, joining us on the show this week, Anthony Barese, music director of Opera Southwest. Tony, it's so great to see you again.
Great to see you too.
Look at that hat.
Oh, Mercedes.
Yeah.
Oliver Camacho, there he is. Look at that hat.
I have worn this hat on this show before, but now that we're
And you didn't remember, George.
Matt Cummings, where's the hat?
I left it at the beach where I got a little sun-kissed today. But, you know, that's just from a year of not going outside. So what you going to do about it?
Weston Williams, too cool for a hat.
Oh, absolutely. At some point, I feel like I'm going to get too cool for this hair. I'm just going to shave it all off. And then the eyebrows, and then the mustache, and then the beard, and then just be completely hairless and vulnerable on the show, which I think is what we really want going forward.
Once again, let me just point out a couple things. First of all, yes, we beat Germany! I can die happy. It doesn't matter what happens now. England, we finally beat Germany. Point number 2, this is not a racist flag. This is an England flag.
I wouldn't go that far.
It does look pretty racist.
Matt, a rough week for the IOC.
Rough week for the IOC on the dimension of racial bias alone. Within one day, you had 2 African sprinters, Christine Bomba and Beatrice Masilingi, who had been ruled ineligible because of their testosterone levels. You had Sha'Carri Richardson, who was suspended due to THC levels in testing, and the governing board for the swimming allowed that the swim caps that accommodate natural black hair were not going to be allowed for the games too. So just bad luck. Really bad luck.
Olympics start. I forgive my ignorance. I kind of don't really care about the Olympics, but have they started yet?
They're in trials.
Okay.
They've been doing trials.
They're in trials. Oliver in Wimbledon land, of course. What's the update there, Oliver?
Well, earlier today, Canadian Felix Auger-Aliassime beat Sasha Zverev, which is an upset, and that making Felix Auger-Aliassime the last person of color in the top 8 men and top 8 women total. So, they've been whittling down the field over there in England, where they like it white, just like your flag behind you.
If we're all giving sports updates, can I chime in with the Formula One update? Okay. The one and only ever black Formula One driver, Lewis Hamilton, last year tied the record for most world championships of all time, 7. We're hoping that he wins this year, although it is looking increasingly grimmer. Formula One has imposed a bunch of rules that price caps for teams, and Mercedes put all their eggs in next year's car and are not really developing this year's car. And Lewis Hamilton hasn't had a podium in about 4 races, and it's just looking really grim. And it looks like he's going to be defeated by the Dutchman Verstappen, yeah.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. Longtime F1 fan here, just like you. I'm really impressed, Tony, that you busted that out. Let's talk some opera.
All right.
Chalk Talk on Opera Box Score.
Euro 2020, although it's happening in 2020, is the World Cup of just European soccer teams. We are down to 4 in the bracket. England plays Denmark on Wednesday, Italy and Spain on Tuesday of the week that we're recording. Gentlemen, you do realize, of course, that if England beats Denmark and gets into the final, and dare I say wins the final, I will be completely unbearable. We are going to try and work through the remaining bracket, see if we can predict a winner. Round 1, Weston is going to back England. I'm going to back Denmark, and we're going to make our cases to our judge, Tony Barese, based on these factors. Operas that are set in that country, the number of opera houses that country has and the capacity of those houses, quality of the composers from that country, the number of performances by composers from that country, the prominence of singers from that country. So it's a pretty wide barrel of metrics here that we four are using to make our cases. Later on in round 1, Matt backing Italy, Oliver backing Spain. But we're going to kick it off with Weston's England.
George, I think I might need to borrow your racist flag there. When I initially picked England, I thought George was going to be judging this instead of Anthony. So I feel like I might be at a more of a disadvantage than I initially thought, but that's okay. So England is maybe not the first country that springs to mind when you're thinking about opera, right? I feel like people tend to gravitate towards your Germanys, your Frances, your Englands.
Definitely start with an apology.
That's the way to go. But that's the thing, though, is that there's no need for England to apologize, because once you start looking at these stats, you're like, oh, wait, this is kind of a little superpower in and of itself. I was looking at a bunch of stats. These are all my stats are from operabase.com. This is I decided to look at the 2018-2019 season because obviously I don't want to count anything from the pandemic because all bets are off there. And Great Britain had the 6th most operas performed in the world, which is pretty impressive.
Not even top 5.
Well, but it beats out France and Spain completely. While it's not, number 1, it definitely is punching above its weight class, especially for a country that had a bit of a operatic dry spell between Handel and Benjamin Britten, but
a short stretch of music.
A little short stretch.
Gilbert and Sullivan, if you please.
But you have to remember too that in the 2018-2019 season, London had the most operas performed than any other individual city in the world. London. And it was a second in the number of productions compared to Moscow, I believe, which is pretty impressive. There are over 430 opera companies in the US, in the UK, according to Opera Base, which is very impressive. There are, and then if you look at another list of top composers, in terms of the 2018-2019 season, Handel saw 511 performances, which is 9th place out of 10. But you also have to remember that Handel is the only Baroque composer on that list. It's all 19th century basic composers, and Mozart. Like, what is that? But Handel is like holding on not just like England, but like the Baroque period entirely, which I think is pretty cool. England is also one of the home to a lot of, I think, very offbeat composers. If you look at some of their offerings, you have like Ethel Smith, probably the most famous female composer of the past, 300-400 years, honestly. Benjamin Britten, of course, single-handedly revitalized British opera, and I think arguably was, instrumental in modern styles of opera. I would also mention that, if you go way, way back, you've got like Purcell, England getting at the ground floor, really, really solid stuff. And while maybe they don't have necessarily like the breadth of like Italy in terms of like all of the great like warhorse composers, they are a powerhouse in terms of contemporary composers. I would argue that there are more relevant 20th century and 21st century English composers than there are from any other country on this list. I mean, you look at Peter Maxwell Davies, Thomas Addis, George Benjamin are some favorites of mine. I mean, these are all big, heavy hitters in the contemporary opera world. And a couple of those are still alive, which is a nice bonus. In terms of singers, you've got, quintessentially British voices like Peter Pears, Ian Bostridge, Janet Baker, Kathleen Ferrier, John Tomlinson, Alice Coote, Sarah Connolly. They all have very British voices and a very specific sense of drama that you don't necessarily see with a lot of, singers from other countries, in my opinion. And I would also be remiss, as far as singing goes, to mention countertenor Alfred Deller, who paved the way for the modern countertenor. And I think that because of through Alfred Deller, we have one of the most important developments in vocal technique coming from England that is now a quintessential part of historic period practice. They basically invented a new voice type, which is not something that I think you can really say out of any of the other countries here. And for that reason, even though it might be a little bit of an underdog at first glance, I think England has a pretty good shot of winning it all this year in soccer.
Wow, you put your best foot forward there, Weston. Good effort. I like it. All right, let's get real now, okay? Let's talk about Denmark. Side note, I'm happy to cheer on Denmark as an England fan just for today. Once we meet on the pitch for the Euros, all bets are off. All right, Carlsberg beer, one of those delicious Danish beers. Its old advertising slogan was Carlsberg, probably the best lager in the world. You know, when it comes to opera, I think the same thing applies. You know, Denmark, probably the most underrated opera country in the world. Copenhagen, it's just plain cool. It's the place to be. Let's talk opera houses. I'm going to leave everything on the floor. I'm not saving anything for the next game. What a rookie mistake you made, Weston.
Because he won't make it past the first round.
All right, we got two big opera houses. The Royal Danish Opera, led by John Fulljames, and the Danish National Opera. Those are both in Copenhagen. And actually, the Copenhagen Opera House looks remarkably like Jabba's sail barge, which is really beautifully done. They dropped.
Did you mean that as a point for or against?
That's my question.
$370 million to build that in 2000. All right, here's the stat that matters. Is this. There are 36 opera companies in Denmark. That is for a country of 6 million people per capita. That blows all these competitors out of the water. That shows the importance of this art form to this nation. Let's look at the composers. Edvard Grieg, Carl Nielsen, Paul Ruders, who just wrote Handmaid's Tale.
What's a good Grieg opera?
I'm not going to get into specifics here. I don't have the time for that. Right. And look, this just in. Kaya Sarajevo's Innocence, coming up next season at the Met, mind you, was commissioned by the Danish National Opera. We've got writers, stories from the likes of Hans Christian Andersen. We've got voices like baritone Bo Skovhus and tenor Lauritz Melchior, and directors like Kasper Holten, who cut his teeth in Denmark and then would go and run the Royal Opera House. So are these household names? No, they're not. But in the Euro 2020 competition, Ukraine, it wasn't a household name. Switzerland, that wasn't a household name either. But boy, this roster of singers, writers, directors, composers, houses is so unique, and it deserves to go to the final. Bereze, make your call.
This is tougher than I thought it would be.
You got to take off points for Edvard Grieg because he was Norwegian.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Well, I also don't know of any operas that you wrote.
That's fine. That's fine.
That too.
But
double
hey,
points.
look, IKEA. Okay, IKEA.
That's Swedish.
When you said Sarajevo, it's like she's not. But you made the point that, I mean,
she's Finnish, isn't she? Sarajevo.
He's Finnish,
but he said it was commissioned by the.
Yes,
he's playing this pan-Scandinavian league over here.
I mean, man, this is tough. This is really tough. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to go with England simply because it's just got a longer history. I don't know. I'm sorry, George, but you made some compelling arguments, but then you also made some serious mistakes.
Well, if he starts crying, he can always dab his eyes with his enormous England flag immediately behind him.
Good call. Bad call on Opera Box Score.
Good call, bad call is the way we end every show. Toti Bereze, great to have you on. By the way, we'll give you a chance to hype anything that you want to hype, or
let him think about it for a second.
Share. We'll let you go last. I do want to just remind the listeners, Toti Bereze, correct me if I'm wrong, you were the man who ate a page of a score.
Yep.
after Donald Trump was elected. Am I right?
No, it had actually weirdly nothing to do with Trump. It was when there was one of the millionth votes to repeal Obamacare, and people said, "Oh, it's not going to succeed because John McCain is going to do the right thing." And I said, "If John McCain does the right thing, I will eat a page of Tosca live on Facebook, live." And he did, and I ate it, and within 10 minutes, this thing was going viral, so I immediately deleted it and got rid of it.
All right, well, we'll let you go last to hype something. We'll throw it over to Oliver Camacho first.
So five Americans have been selected to be one of the 43 singers from 21 different countries competing in the 2021 Queen Sonia International Music Competition. They are sopranos Erica Bykoff and Liv Redpath, baritone Blake Denson, bass Brent Smith, and friend of the show, countertenor Arianus Bancon. So we'll look forward to that, and we'll give you results in August.
Matt Cummings.
The New York Times this week published a really interesting conversation with the head of costumes for English National Opera, a woman named Sarah Bowen. It's a really fascinating look inside one of the jobs that's so crucial to the art form, but really does not get the same amount of attention as the music or the singers or anything else that we talked about in our bracket tonight, but absolutely deserves it. So check it out. We will share the link out.
Weston Williams still in shocked silence over that England loss. Our guest, Anthony Barrese.
Yeah, I just want to briefly tout the stuff that I'm doing in my company, Opera Southwest. We're going to open up with a production of La Scala di Seta in Albuquerque at the Albuquerque Museum between September 10th and 12th. This will make us the company that has done the most productions of Rossini operas than any other American company, with the exception of the Met. We will be tied with the Met with this production of Scala di Seta, and then we will burst through that next
dubious
season.
Honor.
The Rossini part or the Met part?
Being tied with anything for the Met, yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
You can take them, Anthony.
And then we're going to continue our season with production of La Traviata in October, and then the New Mexico premiere of Robert Xavier Rodriguez's Frida in February, conducted by Zoe Zagnotti, wonderful female Greek conductor, and we're going to finish in March with me conducting the Opera Southwest premiere of Pélias in Mélisande by Debussy.
Ow. Some big...
Which was almost set in Spain, if I'm not mistaken.
Almost.
Let it go, Oliver.
Well, by the time you get this, of course, England and Denmark will have clashed in the Euro 2020 semifinal. I'm not going to ask you to pray with me again like last week, but come on, England, you can do it. We are so close. That's it for this week's edition of America's Talk radio show about opera. Our announcer is Norm Woodel. He's at normwoodel.com. On Facebook, search for Opera Box Score. On Twitter and Instagram, we're at Opera Box Score. Help us deepen our bench of listeners by liking and sharing our social media posts. Email us your hot takes on our stories, operaboxscore@gmail.com. Subscribe to the podcast on Stitcher or just favorite that show on Apple Podcasts. Again, if you're listening to us on Dallas Opera Network, you just get a little snippet of the entire show. Head on over to Apple Podcasts. The views and opinions expressed on Opera Box Score are solely those of the show's creative team. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of the accounts of this show without the express written consent of Opera Box Score is kind of like scoring an own goal. Our creative consultant's Oliver Camacho. Our audio and video editor is Weston Williams. For your co-host, Matt Cummings, and our guest, Anthony Barrese, I'm George Cederquist, asking you to continue the conversation about opera as you fantasize about setting your opera in Spain. We're back with an all-new show next week. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more general directors who don't direct on the stage. Join us.